Previously on Purple Haze feedback. Passione has been taken over by Giorno Giovanna, a young upstart from Naples. Supporting him are Jean-Pierre Polnareff and Guido Mista, who, in the 6 months since the events of Vento Oreo, have gained complete control over what used to be Diavolo's gang. However, there are some who are malcontent with Giorno's leadership. To deal with them, Mista employs a young man to see whether he remains loyal to Giorno Giovanna. His name is Panacotta Fugo. In a vast and empty stadium, under a sky through which a Speedwagon Foundation blimp sails, Guido Mista orders Panacotta Fugo to eliminate Passione's retired narcotics team. Chapter 2. I Saw a Skull, Part 2. At roughly the same point in time, in a warehouse at the edge of Villa San Giovanni, a small town on the Strait of Messina, affairs were already set in motion. A man's sobs echoed through the dimly lit room. A boy stood in front of him. Sunken cheeks, shockingly large eyes. Cuts ran this way and that all over him, even his eyelids and lips. These were not old wounds, most still had scabs on them in all sorts of unpleasant colors. Even now, the boy was carving a new gash with a dagger, cutting his own cheek open. The boy helpfully provided oral renditions of the sound effects he imagined would accompany his cutting. He looked barely alive, his eyes unfocused. Once he had more or less finished slicing his own flesh open, he began mumbling incoherently. "Modern man," he began, "is incomplete. All kinds of shit is just not enough. I don't mean like nutrition or exercise. I mean, in comparison to primitive man, there's something in our lives, their daily lives, that just isn't there." There was a sudden crackle in his throat, and something came flying out. He'd cuffed up a scab from a wound on the inside of his throat. "Like, they say they don't ever feel alive. Not really. I'm serious, no legs being pulled, serious business." Blood was now oozing down the side of his mouth, but the boy did not appear to notice. "So what of it? Well, this is the really extra serious bit. When a life form doesn't have enough life power, they go extinct, without fail, like the pandas. They're doomed. They only eat bamboo. Nothing else. There's no hope for them. Mankind's not much better off. We're trying so hard to be civilized, to hide the fact that we got nothing else to live for. I don't know who said any of this shit, but someone did, and gotta avoid that. I gotta feel alive, so..." He started cutting himself again. "The pain makes everything real, calls forth the life within me. Without that I'll go extinct, and I don't want to be extinct." "Oh, so, what, you, was it Harry? Halle? No, Sally. Something like that, right?" There was a lightness to his tone, like he was addressing an old friend. The man, whose name was actually Sally, was covered in sweat, his forehead creased with lines of worry. This was a moment of crisis. He too was a former member of Passione. In times past, he had clashed with Mista and Giorno in pursuit of treasure left by one of the gang's leaders, Polpo. Much like Fugo, he had been ordered to make amends. "But the name Sally, that's a very salty name. Get it? Because it means salt." "Sally, salty. Goddamn, that's funny." He laughed so hard, he was gasping for breath. But when he realized Sally wasn't laughing with him, the laughter dissipated. "I'm talking to you here," he growled. "And when Vittorio Catali speaks to you, you'd best not ignore him." "Or wait, do you not have manners? Hello? Which of us is in the right here? Me, being all polite, speaking clearly, making sense, or you, sitting there in rude, stony silence, not saying a blessed thing? No matter how you look at it, the answer's me, ain't it? You got no arguments with that, do you? Not surprised. Or do you? If you've got a problem with me, show it. Show me your stand." Let me see what craftwork can do. Sally was a good deal older than Vittorio, but the boy clearly had the upper hand. Everything about the younger boy made Sally's hair stand on end. He'd been through his share of close calls, even fought Mister, and lived to tell the tale. But he'd never been this scared. The boy's bug-crazy eyes were staring at him, windows to a soul found wanting. For all his talk of mankind and civilization, this boy's eyes proved he had no future. There was no glimmer, no sign of what he might become. No dream, no hope, no passion. Only the hostility that came tumbling out of his mouth.
Is he really part of the narcotics team? The team that turned an 11-figure profit?
Sally found it hard to believe. In the old Passione, they had been the team everyone dreamed of joining. The team that got everything they wanted, that sucked at the teat of God. They were kings of the world, with all the money and women they could ask for, able to do anything they wanted. Or so everyone thought. Yet, this kid was simple-minded, oblivious, uneducated, concerned with nothing but what irritated him the most at any given second. And right now, Sally's gaze drifted away from Vittorio. There was a third figure in the room, sitting in the corner, barely moving enough to breathe. Her skin was shockingly pale, her lips almost as pale with only the faintest hint of red, her figure obscured in shadows. Empty eyes stared vacantly at nothing. She was humming a song so faintly it could scarcely be heard.
La 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 la.
It was a famous Sicilian song, Vitti na Crozza, I saw a skull. What should have been a fast, buoyant song was almost unrecognizable, so sluggish and slurred the delivery. She was young, still a girl. Her hair spilled out across the floor. It was very, very long, like she had forgotten to cut it, or forgotten this was even an option. Sitting limp on the ground, her frame was withered and frail, her pale neck trembling under the weight of her head, looking like it might snap at any second. Her name was Angelica Atanasio. Her stand was called Nightbird Flying. It appeared to be nothing but a little bird flying around, no threat at all. But it had led Sally and his partner Zucchero here, to this place of death. Sally glared at Angelica with all his might, but she ignored it. This was not a display of bravado, she simply wasn't even aware of his presence. A trickle of drool ran down her chin. There was blood in it. She was bleeding from the mouth. She was obviously a junkie. But this thoughtless kid, with no hope for the future, and this junkie girl with not much longer to live, these pathetic failures had driven Sally into a corner, a fact that enraged him. He'd bit his lip so hard it was bleeding, but he couldn't feel the pain, and not because he was too angry to feel it. He'd been tainted by Nightbird Flying, and no longer felt pain. The world beneath his feet felt shaky. It was all he could do to remain on his own 2 feet. He felt dizzy, but the dizziness would not fade. His sense of balance would not return. Advanced movement was out of the question. None of his usual tricks were even remotely possible. A direct assault was the only option. Sally glared at Vittorio. The boy was cutting himself again. The flat of his blade was like a mirror, and Sally could see himself reflected in it. Sally had been keeping an eye on the dagger. In the same way that Mister was a gunslinger, Vittorio was a knife specialist. But in a battle between stands, an ordinary blade would be nearly useless, so what secret function did it serve? Sally's craftwork had the ability to make objects stick where they were. He could be shot with bullets, stabbed with blades, and the moment they touched his skin, he could fix them in place and they would not harm him. So a dagger would normally be of no concern. Normally. Right. I have nothing to fear. By this point, he had lost the ability to make rational decisions. He had survived to this point by respecting the limitations of his own stand and fleeing whenever he believed himself to be in danger. But he failed to do that here. Much like Angelica, he could no longer think things through. Vittorio stopped cutting and gave him a frosty look.
Come on, your stand and my dolly dagger. Which one has the right to exist? Let's find out!
The moment the dagger's tip left the boy's flesh, Sally lunged forward. If Vittorio was going to try and stab him, Sally was going to let him. He would fix it in place, then do the same to the boy's body. But even as he closed the distance, the blade's tip never pointed at him. Not only did he make no move to attack with the blade, he made no move at all. He just stood there, waiting, not even trying to defend. It was strange, unnatural, but Sally was too close to stop himself now. He had to follow through, and he did, slamming his fist into Vittorio's unguarded chest. He fixed the boy's heart in place, killing him instantly. There was no way for him to avoid it. Sally had won, or so he thought. The boy's foot raised up and kicked him. Sally went flying, rolling across the ground. Impossible, he thought. He'd struck the boy's chest. He looked up and Vittorio was doubled over, clutching his chest in obvious pain. He groaned, sweat pouring down his face, but he should have been dead. How? Sally wondered, then noticed something downright bizarre. There was something floating in the air between them. It was a reddish pink and looked sticky, like meat, like an organ, small, compact, round. Sally recognized it. A heart. A heart torn out of someone's chest, fixed in space. But whose? Sally's head suddenly looked downwards. He had lost the strength to support it, and the weight of his head had pulled it down, giving him a look at the gaping hole in his chest. Sally's attack had reflected back on him, but he no longer had the time to wonder why. With no heart to pump it, his body was starved for blood and his consciousness faded, never to awaken again. With a splat, Sally's heart fell to the ground, free of the power that held it suspended. Vittorio writhed on the ground in agony.
Massimo!
He cried, calling someone outside the warehouse.
Massimo, help!
The warehouse door was flung open, light poured in, and a tall man stepped inside. He was dragging something. It looked like a plastic sheet of some kind, but he dropped it when he saw Vittorio. You do something crazy again, he said, his voice like the wind whistling through a crack in the wall.
Hurry! My heart, it's not beating right, stopping, 30% stopped.
I keep warning you, Vittorio. Your dolly dagger can only reflect 70% of damage. You can't let just anybody hit you and expect to get away with it. As he spoke, the tall man strode over to the boy and thumped him hard on the chest, knocking Vittorio down. Angelica cackled hysterically.
Christ, take it easy,
Vittorio said, getting back up. He was no longer in pain. When the man touched him, all bodily functions had returned to normal. The man ignored him and walked over to Angelica. This all? He asked. She nodded.
There's nobody else around. Nobody at all. Nobody looking at us.
Then she pointed at the plastic thing he tossed aside.
Except that.
He said, looking at it.
Oh, is that him?
Vittorio said.
Zucchero? I heard he can deflate things.
He came walking over to get a closer look. Examined closely, it was shaped like a man-shaped balloon with the air let out of it, and it was twitching.
Most of the time, you can't use your power on yourself, but this guy clearly can.
Yes, and when he's flat like that, he can slip through narrow gaps and get close to his targets. That's how he and Sally made their approach.
Bad luck. We've got Angelica. Nobody gets the drop on us.
Vittorio stamped on the flat man, grinding his foot against him.
Ew, gross. He's pulsing.
Even deflated, his heart still beating. Even now, my manic depressions made it impossible for him to control himself. The tall man looked down at his defeated opponent without emotion. Massimo Volpe. This was the man's name, The man so dangerous he was at the top of Giorno Giovanna's hit list. His existence was seen as such a problem that as long as he could be eliminated, the others would be allowed to flee. But to look at him, he seemed the quiet type, not someone who made a strong impression. He was Italian, but of an angular, bony build that made him look more Irish. His nose was thin, as were his eyes and eyebrows. Vittorio continued toying with Zucchero's remains.
So he can't inflate himself, but now we can't torture him either? Or can he talk like this?
Who knows? There's no saving him now.
Man, your manic depression is nasty. Textbook overkill.
One final member of their team entered the room, an old man.
God damn it, Massimo. I told you not to fight unless you have to. Vittorio and I can handle mooks like this. You and Angelica should let us protect you.
The old man's face was covered in deep wrinkles, but his back was straight and his movements lively.
Oh, Kakaki!
Angelica said happily and wafted over to him. She rubbed her face on his thigh like a cat greeting her owner. He patted her head tenderly, but never took his eyes off Massimo.
You hear me, Massimo? You're the heart of this team. We only exist for you.
But you're the leader, Vladimir. I just do what you say.
Massimo's heart did not appear to be in it. They had had this conversation before.
I know you don't see it.
Vladimir Kokaki sighed.
You could rule the world, you know. With a stand like yours, you could place yourself above all other men.
So could you. No one can beat your rainy day dream away.
Ooh, and me? My dolly dagger's pretty good too, right? We're all great.
A sharp mind in an old body, a man who didn't care, a thoughtless boy, and a junkie girl. This was the narcotics team all Passione was frantically searching for. Hello everyone, welcome to the end of episode 2 of Purple Haze Feedback and the end of chapter 1 of the book. Now I call it chapter 2 because that's how it feels to me. I'm kind of splitting up the book chapters differently to how the book itself splits its chapters, so bear with me there. A couple of points that I quickly wanted to say. First one is something that I wanted to say in the previous episode. Italian, I don't know it. I don't know the language, so a lot of pronunciations like Giuseppe Miazza apparently, not Giuseppe Miazza. Stuff like that I will get wrong. Vitti Crozza is me just kind of like approximating Italian. I don't know if that's how you pronounce it. So yeah, obviously some pronunciation will be wrong and I apologize if that is the case. It's particularly prominent with Sally, which is actually pronounced Sale. But that's actually not my fault because Araki specifically writes Sally's name as Sally in Vento Oreo. Of course, Sally and Zucchero are two of the characters that we saw in Vento Oreo and they make a quick little comeback here only to die, sort of. Don't know about Zucchero, literally moments after. Speaking of Sally and Zucchero, it's interesting that both of them die in a very specific way, as in both of them use their power on themselves, whether intentionally or not, and both of them have like this weird thing going on with blood. Like Zucchero still has the blood flowing through him implicitly because of manic depression, and Sally dies specifically because he doesn't have any blood running through him. So kind of an odd comparison to make there, but it's something that I noticed. The second thing that I wanted to talk about was voices. So last episode I said that I wouldn't get too heavily into the voices, but these 4 new characters that were introduced in this chapter I think are pretty strong characters. They all have a unique voice and I really wanted to give that to them. So rather than just kind of like changing pitch and kind of being vague about who's talking and stuff like that, I wanted to give each character a specific tone and a specific kind of a manner of speaking. Vittorio is all crazy like. Kokaki is very like authoritative, very Gandalf-like. I think I channeled a lot of my inner Ian McKellen when I was doing his lines. Probably not very well. But the girl, Angelica, I probably had the most trouble with because I needed to get the pitch a bit higher because she was stated to be a bit younger. But I couldn't, so I kind of had to like modify it artificially, and that may or may not show in the final product. And finally we have Massimo Volpe, who I'm having a lot of trouble giving a voice. Because, I don't know, he's very calm and it seems like he's very soft-spoken. The book calls him quiet, but he's also a very large figure in terms of like his authority within the group. So kind of balancing the two of those is very difficult. I'm kind of modeling my current voice on Mamoru Miyano's performance of Crollo in the Hunter x Hunter anime. If you guys have seen that and you know what that's like, then give me some feedback, because I would very much appreciate it. With all that being said, like I said just now, feedback on anything really would be greatly appreciated. And yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. I put a lot of work into it. If you guys did, then consider giving this video a like, and be sure to subscribe so you know when the latest JoJo videos are coming out. I've got a super analysis video. I think it's probably my favorite video so far, and it's coming out very soon, so be sure to look out for that. And until then, I bid you all farewell.